Earth's savage retaliation left the Galactic Council in stunned silence. The pristine halls of the Galactic Council's central station gleamed under artificial starlight as Ambassador Kethvar reviewed the latest reports from the Outer Rim territories. His four eyes scanned the holographic displays with growing satisfaction, each data point confirming what the Zephyrian Empire had long suspected. Humanity was nothing more than another primitive species ripe for exploitation. The humans had been discovered only 18 months ago, broadcasting primitive electromagnetic signals from their small blue world in a backwater spiral arm. Their technology was laughably basic, their military consisting of crude projectile weapons and chemical propulsion systems that wouldn't threaten a civilian transport vessel. Most amusing of all, they seemed to believe they were alone in the universe. Kethvar's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. The Zephyrians had been expanding their territory for 3 millennia, absorbing over 200 lesser species into their empire. Some joined willingly after demonstrations of superior technology. Others required more persuasive methods. The humans would undoubtedly fall into the latter category, given their apparent aggression toward their own kind. The initial survey reports painted a picture of a species constantly at war with itself, dividing their singular world into competing territories and wasting resources on internal conflicts. Their governments were fractured, their military forces scattered and poorly coordinated. It would be like harvesting fruit from an unguarded orchard. "Council Member Kethvar," a smooth voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to see diplomat Zarion of the Hegemony approaching, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into prismatic patterns. "I trust you've reviewed the human assessment?" "Indeed," Kethvar replied, gesturing toward the holographic displays. "A textbook case for standard annexation protocol. Their world contains significant mineral wealth, particularly in rare earth elements our industrial sectors require. The population of 8 billion provides an adequate labor force once properly conditioned." Zarion's form shimmered, indicating agreement. "The Hegemony concurs with this assessment. However, some council members have expressed concerns about proceeding without formal first contact protocols. The Altarian delegation in particular advocates for diplomatic engagement before any enforcement actions." Kethvar's secondary arms gestured dismissively. "The Altarians lack the resolve necessary for galactic governance. They would waste decades attempting to negotiate with every primitive species we encounter. Time is a luxury we cannot afford, particularly with the Void Syndicate pressing against our borders in the Kepler sectors." The truth was more complex than Kethvar cared to admit publicly. The Zephyrian Empire needed the resources of the human world to fuel their ongoing territorial expansion. Recent conflicts with rival galactic powers had strained their industrial capacity, and the discovery of Earth represented a perfect opportunity to replenish their strategic reserves while adding another tributary species to their collection. "What of their military capabilities?" Zarion inquired, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Negligible," Kethvar replied confidently. "Their most advanced vessels barely achieve escape velocity from their homeworld. Their weapon systems are chemical and nuclear in nature, incapable of breaching modern deflector shields. Intelligence estimates suggest we could achieve total orbital supremacy with a single battle group." The assessment was based on extensive reconnaissance conducted by cloaked surveillance ships over the past year. The observers had cataloged human military installations, monitored their communications, and analyzed their technological capabilities with thorough precision. Every metric confirmed what the Council's xenobiology experts had predicted. Humanity represented no meaningful threat to galactic civilization. What the surveillance teams had missed, however, were the implications of humanity's peculiar evolutionary development. Unlike most sapient species, humans had evolved as persistence hunters on a world with relatively high gravity and atmospheric pressure. Their cardiovascular systems were exceptionally robust. their reaction times honed by millions of years of predator-prey dynamics, and their psychological makeup shaped by constant environmental challenges. More critically, humanity's fractured political landscape masked an underlying unity that emerged when faced with external threats. Their history was filled with examples of bitter enemies joining forces against common adversaries, transforming from competitors into coordinated fighting forces with remarkable speed. But these subtleties were lost on the council members who viewed the assessment data. They saw only the crude weapons, the primitive propulsion systems, and the apparent political disunity. The psychological profiles suggested humans were emotional and irrational, prone to panic when confronted with superior force. Kethvar activated the council chamber's central projector, displaying a three-dimensional model of the Sol system. "I propose we proceed with annexation operations within the next solar cycle. A demonstration fleet will establish orbital control around their primary world, followed by the standard compliance ultimatum. Once their governments submit, we can begin resource extraction and population management." "The hegemony supports this proposal," Zerion stated formally. "However, we recommend monitoring their response carefully. Some species exhibit unpredictable behavior when first contacted by galactic civilization." Around the chamber, representatives from dozens of member species indicated their agreement through various species-specific gestures. The molluscoid collective pulsed their chromatic displays in synchronized patterns. The hive mind coordinators transmitted their approval through quantum-encrypted thought streams. The silicon-based confederacy resonated harmonics that translated as enthusiastic endorsement. Only the Altarian delegation maintained their opposition, their spokeswoman rising to address the assembly. "Honored colleagues, we urge caution in this matter. The human species exhibits several unusual characteristics that warrant further study before any military action. Their adaptability quotient exceeds standard parameters, and their technological development curve suggests significant potential for rapid advancement." Kethvar's patience was wearing thin. "Delegate Tanari, your concerns are noted but ultimately irrelevant. The surveillance data clearly demonstrates that human technology poses no threat to Council forces. Their fastest vessels require months to traverse their own solar system, while our battle groups can achieve the same distance in hours. This discussion grows tiresome." The Altarian delegate persisted despite the obvious lack of support from her colleagues. "Ambassador Kethvar, we have observed their entertainment media extensively. Human fiction repeatedly depicts scenarios where inferior forces overcome superior enemies through innovation, determination, and unconventional tactics. This suggests a cultural mindset that may not respond to intimidation as predicted." A wave of dismissive sounds filled the chamber as various species expressed their impatience with the Altarian position. The idea that primitive fiction could provide meaningful intelligence about military capabilities struck most council members as absurd. "Fiction is not reality, delegate," Zerion interjected smoothly. "Entertainment serves as escapist fantasy for species unable to accept their limitations. The humans create stories about defeating superior forces precisely because they know such victories are impossible in actual conflict." The vote proceeded according to established protocols, with each member species casting their decision through the quantum mesh network that connected every council station across the galaxy. The results appeared within minutes, overwhelming support for immediate annexation proceedings, with only the Altarian systems dissenting. Kethvar felt a surge of satisfaction as he transmitted the authorization codes to the Zephyrian battle fleet waiting in the nearby Proxima Centauri system. Within hours, the most powerful military force in local space would be positioning itself around the human home world, ready to deliver the compliance ultimatum that had brought hundreds of other species into the galactic community. The message would be simple and direct. Submit to Council authority, accept the appointed governors and resource extraction protocols. and transition peacefully into the galactic economy as a tributary species. Resistance would result in the systematic destruction of their industrial capacity and the deployment of pacification protocols across their population centers. No species had ever refused the ultimatum when faced with the overwhelming technological superiority of a Council battle fleet. The humans would prove no different, despite their colorful fiction and emotional unpredictability. As the Council session concluded and representatives began returning to their respective sectors, Kethvar allowed himself a moment of anticipation. The successful annexation of the human world would significantly enhance Zephyrian influence within the Council hierarchy, potentially positioning his empire for even greater territorial expansion in the coming cycles. What he could not have anticipated was the small group of human scientists working in a converted missile silo beneath the Colorado Mountains, their instruments detecting the faint gravitational anomalies created by faster-than-light travel as the Zephyrian fleet began its approach toward Earth. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at the readings on her screen with growing alarm, her years of theoretical research into exotic propulsion suddenly taking on terrifying practical significance. The objects approaching their solar system were moving at velocities that should have been impossible, following trajectories that defied conventional physics. Humanity was about to receive its first contact with galactic civilization, but not in the peaceful manner that generations of scientists and philosophers had imagined. The readings suggested a military formation of substantial size, approaching with obvious hostile intent. In government facilities around the world, emergency protocols activated as the reality of the situation became clear. Humanity was not alone in the universe, and their new neighbors were not coming in peace. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reshape the balance of power across the galaxy, though neither side yet understood the true scope of what was about to unfold. The Zephyrian fleet continued its steady approach, confident in their overwhelming technological advantage and the predictable outcome of their mission. Behind them, the Galactic Council prepared to welcome another tributary species into their vast, interstellar empire. But on the small blue world that was their target, 8 billion humans were about to discover what their species was truly capable of when faced with extinction. Earth's savage retaliation left the Galactic Council in stunned silence. The Zephyrian battle fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system with textbook precision, their massive dreadnoughts casting shadows across the asteroid belt as they began their deliberate approach toward the third planet. Fleet Admiral Zextar observed the primitive human world through his flagship's advanced sensors, noting the chaotic orbital infrastructure and the pathetic chemical rockets struggling to achieve basic atmospheric escape. The human response to their arrival had been exactly as predicted. Electromagnetic communications spiked across all frequencies as their governments attempted to coordinate some form of response. Military installations went to high alert, though their crude weapons remained pointed uselessly at each other rather than toward the approaching fleet. "Admiral," reported his tactical officer, "we're receiving multiple transmission attempts from the human governments. They appear to be requesting communication." Zextar's armor plating shifted in amusement. "How quaint. They wish to negotiate before seeing our capabilities. Very well, establish a communication link with their primary governing bodies. Let them understand the futility of resistance before we proceed with occupation protocols." The transmission connected simultaneously to the United Nations headquarters, the Pentagon, the Kremlin, and a dozen other centers of human political power. Zextar allowed his image to fill their primitive display screens, his towering frame and battle-scarred carapace designed to inspire immediate submission. "Primitive humans of the third planet," his words were automatically translated into major human languages. "I am Fleet Admiral Zextar of the Zephyrian Empire, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Council. Your species is hereby commanded to surrender immediately to Council authority and accept integration into galactic civilization as a tributary world. The reactions from various human leaders were transmitted back to the fleet in real time. Some appeared stunned into silence, others began shouting in their crude languages, and a few seemed to be attempting military coordination despite the obvious impossibility of meaningful resistance. "You will cease all military activities immediately," Zextar continued, his 4 eyes glowing with predatory satisfaction. "Your governments will prepare for the arrival of council administrators who will oversee your transition into the galactic community. Resistance will result in the systematic destruction of your infrastructure and the implementation of pacification protocols across your population centers." What happened next surprised the Zephyrian admiral. Instead of the expected panic or immediate capitulation, the human communications channels suddenly went silent. Not chaotic, not frantic, but professionally quiet in a way that suggested coordinated activity rather than confusion. On Earth, President Sarah Morrison closed the communication link and turned to face the assembled leaders of the world's major military powers. The emergency session had been convened within hours of detecting the alien fleet, bringing together individuals who had been adversaries just days earlier. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the situation. "I think we can all agree that our previous disagreements have become somewhat irrelevant." General Chen Wei of the People's Liberation Army nodded grimly. "The threat assessment is clear. These aliens possess technology centuries beyond our current capabilities. Conventional resistance appears futile." "Appears being the operative term," interjected Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the Japanese physicist whose research into exotic matter had suddenly become humanity's most valuable asset. "I've been analyzing their approach vectors and energy signatures. They're using some form of space-time manipulation for propulsion, but the power requirements suggest significant limitations." Defense Secretary James Harrison leaned forward. "What kind of limitations, Doctor?" "They can't maintain those velocities indefinitely. The energy expenditure for faster-than-light travel appears to be enormous, which means they're operating with finite resources. More importantly, their ships are following predictable physics once they drop out of hyperspace. They have inertia, they have momentum, and they appear vulnerable to gravitational effects." Russian Admiral Volkov spoke up. "What are you suggesting, Doctor? That we attempt to fight spacecraft with nuclear weapons?" Dr. Tanaka's smile was cold. "I'm suggesting that we stop thinking like a divided planet and start thinking like a unified species with 8 billion minds working toward the same goal. These aliens made a critical error in their approach." "Which is?" President Morrison asked. "They announced their intentions instead of simply attacking. They want us to surrender, which means they need something from our world that requires a functional infrastructure and living population. That gives us leverage, and more importantly, it gives us time." Around the table, the greatest military minds on Earth began to understand the implications. The aliens' technological superiority was overwhelming, but they had constraints and objectives that could be exploited. Within hours, a transformation began across the planet that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. Ancient enemies shared intelligence freely, pooling their resources and expertise toward a common goal. The Russian nuclear submarine fleet coordinated with American satellite networks. Chinese manufacturing capabilities merged with European scientific research. Indian mathematicians collaborated with Israeli computer specialists on targeting algorithms that had never been contemplated before. The alien fleet continued their stately approach, expecting the usual sequence of panic, negotiation, and eventual submission that had characterized their previous annexations. They observed the cessation of human military communications as evidence of impending surrender, unaware that the silence represented the most coordinated military planning effort in human history. Dr. Sarah Chen worked frantically in her underground facility, her team racing to adapt their experimental gravitational wave detectors into something resembling a functional early warning system. The aliens' approach was generating subtle space-time distortions that could be tracked with sufficient precision to predict their movements. "We're getting real-time telemetry on their fleet composition," she reported to the Joint Command Center. 12 large vessels in a standard battle formation, plus numerous smaller craft that appear to be support ships. They're maintaining a steady deceleration toward Earth orbit, estimated arrival in 18 hours. The response was unlike anything the Zephyrian fleet had encountered in their long history of annexations. Instead of desperate attempts at communication or displays of primitive military force, the human world went dark. Not destroyed, not abandoned, but professionally quiet in a way that suggested preparation rather than panic. Admiral Zextar found this development mildly concerning but not alarming. Some species attempted guerrilla resistance after formal occupation, requiring extended pacification campaigns. The humans were simply demonstrating their intentions earlier in the process. "Sir," his sensor operator reported, "we're detecting unusual activity across the human world, multiple high-energy events that appear to be industrial in nature." "Explain." "They're manufacturing something, Admiral. Large-scale production facilities are operating at maximum capacity, coordinating activities across their entire world. Energy consumption has increased by 40% in the last 12 hours. Zexatar considered this information carefully. The humans were preparing something, though their primitive technology limited their options. "Continue monitoring. Whatever they're producing cannot threaten modern military vessels. Their most powerful weapons rely on crude nuclear fission." What the Zephyrian sensors couldn't detect was the true scope of human activity taking place beneath the surface of their world. Every nuclear submarine in existence was being hastily retrofitted with experimental propulsion systems based on theoretical physics that had never been tested beyond computer simulations. Manufacturing facilities that had produced consumer goods were retooling to create components for weapons that existed only in the imagination of theoretical physicists. The key insight had come from Dr. Tanaka's analysis of the alien propulsion systems. If the aliens were manipulating space-time for faster-than-light travel, then the same principles could potentially be applied to projectile weapons, not to achieve faster-than-light velocity, but to create gravitational effects that could disrupt the delicate balance required for their technology to function. "It's theoretical at best," Dr. Tanaka admitted to the assembled scientists and engineers working around the clock to implement her concepts. "We're essentially trying to create localized gravitational anomalies using nuclear-powered field generators. The mathematics suggest it's possible, but the engineering challenges are enormous." "How enormous?" asked Dr. James Patterson, the American nuclear engineer coordinating the submarine modifications. "We're attempting to compress 3 decades of theoretical research into 18 hours of practical application. The failure rate will be substantial, and even our successful units will only have 1 or 2 shots before their systems overload." Around the world, similar conversations were taking place as humanity's greatest minds tackled challenges that should have required years of development. The difference was motivation. This wasn't academic research or military competition between nations, but a species-wide effort to prevent extinction. The Zephyrian fleet reached Earth's orbital space precisely on schedule, their massive dreadnoughts taking positions that would allow them to project force anywhere on the planet's surface. Admiral Zextar prepared to transmit the final surrender demand, confident that the sight of his battle fleet would convince even the most stubborn humans to accept Council authority. Instead, he was greeted by a transmission from the human world that caught him completely unprepared. "Zephyrian fleet," the voice was calm and professional, belonging to a human female who appeared to be some form of military commander. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Unified Earth Defense Force. You have entered our solar system without invitation and threatened our world with conquest. You have one opportunity to withdraw to a safe distance and request proper diplomatic contact through appropriate channels." The audacity of the message stunned Zextar into momentary silence. These primitives were issuing ultimatums to a battle fleet that could reduce their world to radioactive rubble within hours. "Human commander," he replied, allowing his predatory nature to color his voice. "You appear to misunderstand your situation. Your species possesses no technology capable of threatening Council vessels. Submit now, and your integration into galactic civilization will proceed peacefully. Continue this foolish posturing, and we will be forced to demonstrate the consequences of defying Council authority." The human admiral's response would be remembered across the galaxy for centuries to come. "Admiral Zextar, you appear to misunderstand our species. We don't submit. We adapt, we innovate, and we fight with everything we have. You wanted to see our technology? Allow me to provide a demonstration." The first gravitational torpedo launched from a converted ballistic missile submarine hidden beneath the Arctic ice cap. Its passage through space created ripples in space-time that the Zephyrian sensors detected only seconds before impact. The warhead didn't explode in any conventional sense. Instead, it created a localized gravitational anomaly that lasted for exactly 2.3 seconds. Long enough to disrupt the delicate field harmonics that kept the lead dreadnought's systems operational. Admiral Zextar watched in horror as his flagship's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, sending crew members tumbling through corridors as emergency alarms screamed throughout the vessel. Power fluctuations cascaded through critical systems as the gravitational pulse interfered with their antimatter containment protocols. "Impossible," he whispered, staring at the damage reports flooding his command displays. "They shouldn't possess technology capable of—" The second torpedo struck the port dreadnought before he could finish the thought. This time, the gravitational pulse was stronger, sustained for nearly 4 seconds. The alien vessel's faster-than-light drive containment field collapsed entirely, creating a chain reaction that vented exotic matter into normal space. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface, a brief new star blooming in the night sky as antimatter met matter in an uncontrolled reaction that obliterated the massive warship in seconds. Across the Zephyrian fleet, panic spread as commanders tried to understand how primitive humans had suddenly acquired weapons capable of threatening their most advanced technology. The gravitational pulses were unlike anything in their databases, representing a completely novel approach to warfare. What they couldn't know was that human scientists were learning in real time, analyzing the results of each strike and refining their targeting algorithms. The first 2 torpedoes had been proof of concept. The next salvo would be devastating. Earth's savage retaliation left the Galactic Council in stunned silence. The Galactic Council's emergency session convened in absolute chaos as reports flooded in from the Sol system. Council members who had confidently voted for humanity's annexation just days earlier now stared in disbelief at the tactical data streaming from Admiral Zextar's battered fleet. Ambassador Kethvar's 4 eyes darted frantically between the holographic displays showing the destruction of 3 Zephyrian dreadnoughts. The human weapons were impossible according to every law of physics the Council understood, yet the evidence was undeniable. Somehow, a primitive species with chemical rockets had managed to develop gravitational warfare technology that their greatest scientists claimed was centuries beyond current galactic capabilities. "How is this possible?" demanded Zerion of the hegemony, her crystalline form flickering with agitated energy patterns. "Our intelligence reports indicated they possessed no technology more advanced than nuclear fission." The Altarian delegate, Tanari, remained silent as chaos erupted around the chamber. Her species had warned against hasty action, but even their careful analysis hadn't anticipated anything like this development. The humans weren't just resisting, they were systematically dismantling the most powerful battle fleet in local space using weapons that shouldn't exist. In orbit around Earth, Admiral Zextar struggled to maintain command coherence as his remaining vessels attempted to withdraw to a safe distance. The human attacks had ceased after the destruction of the third dreadnought, but not out of mercy. The silence felt tactical, calculated, as if the primitive species was studying their fleet's responses and preparing their next move. "Sir," his tactical officer reported with barely controlled panic, "the humans are transmitting again." The face that appeared on the command display belonged to the same human admiral who had issued the original warning. Admiral Sarah Chen looked tired but determined, her expression carrying the weight of a species that had just proven they could fight gods and win. "Admiral Zextar," she began, her voice carrying across the quantum communication link to the watching council members. "I trust our demonstration has clarified humanity's position regarding your annexation demand. You now have a choice to make." Zexatar's mandibles clicked nervously. "What choice?" "You can withdraw your fleet beyond the orbit of our outermost planet and request proper diplomatic contact, or you can continue your aggressive posture and discover what other innovations we've developed in the past 24 hours. Chen's smile was cold as starlight. "I should mention that the weapons you've already encountered represent approximately 12% of our current defensive capabilities." The claim was a carefully calculated bluff, backed by just enough truth to be terrifying. Humanity had indeed developed additional weapon systems, though most remained theoretical or barely functional. The gravitational torpedoes had absorbed nearly their entire stockpile of exotic matter, and the manufacturing infrastructure couldn't produce replacements quickly enough to sustain extended combat. But the aliens didn't know that, and Chen was counting on their technological arrogance working against them. Species that had dominated the galaxy for millennia would struggle to accurately assess the capabilities of a civilization that had achieved in hours what should have taken decades. "Admiral Chen," Zextar's voice carried a note of desperate negotiation. "Perhaps we were hasty in our approach. The Council is prepared to consider alternative arrangements for first contact between our civilizations." "The time for negotiation was before you threatened our world with conquest," Chen replied flatly. "Now we'll be setting the terms. You have 1 hour to withdraw to the distance I specified. Any vessel that remains within the orbit of Neptune after that deadline will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly." The transmission ended, leaving Zextar staring at a blank display while his crew awaited orders. Around him, the bridge of his flagship bore scars from the gravitational pulse that had nearly destroyed them. Emergency repairs were ongoing, but several critical systems remained compromised. "Admiral," his navigation officer spoke carefully, "recommend we comply with human demands. Our tactical analysis suggests they possess sufficient firepower to eliminate the remaining fleet." Zexatar wanted to refuse, to maintain the dignity of the Zephyrian Empire and the authority of the Galactic Council, but he was also a military commander responsible for the lives of his crews, and the evidence was overwhelming. Humanity had demonstrated the ability to destroy Council vessels with apparent ease, using technology that existed nowhere else in known space. "Signal fleet withdrawal," he ordered through gritted teeth. "Establish defensive positions beyond the orbit of their outermost planet, and transmit a priority communication to the Council. They need to understand what we're dealing with." Back on Earth, Admiral Chen allowed herself exactly 30 seconds of relief before turning her attention to the next phase of humanity's impossible defense. The gravitational torpedoes had bought them time and demonstrated their capabilities, but the real work was just beginning. "Status report," she called to the combined command center, where representatives from every major nation worked alongside each other with efficiency that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. Dr. Tanaka looked up from her calculations. "We've proven the theoretical framework works, but our resource limitations are critical. The exotic matter required for gravitational field generation is incredibly difficult to produce, even with our entire global infrastructure focused on the problem. How many more torpedoes can we manufacture? With current techniques?" perhaps 20 over the next week, assuming no critical failures in our production systems. The engineering tolerances are pushing our capabilities to absolute limits. President Morrison stepped forward. Doctor, what would you need to increase production? Time and resources we don't have, Tanaka replied honestly. The physics involved require precision manufacturing at the quantum level. We're essentially building each torpedo by hand using modified particle accelerators and nuclear reactors. Around the command center, similar conversations were taking place as humanity grappled with the reality of their situation. They had won the first engagement through surprise and innovation, but sustaining their defense would require continuous technological advancement against adversaries who possessed the accumulated knowledge of hundreds of civilizations. General Chen Wei of the Chinese military raised a critical point. We must assume the aliens will adapt their tactics and potentially summon reinforcements. Our initial advantage came from the unexpected nature of our weapons. That advantage decreases with each engagement. Then we need to keep innovating faster than they can adapt, Admiral Chen replied. What other theoretical weapons can we develop using available resources? The next several hours saw an explosion of creative destruction unlike anything in human history. Theoretical physicists worked with military engineers to weaponize concepts that had existed only in academic papers. Quantum computing specialists collaborated with nuclear submarine crews to create delivery systems for weapons that defied conventional understanding. Dr. Patterson's team had developed a variant of the gravitational torpedo that created sustained field distortions rather than brief pulses. The new weapons required less exotic matter, but demanded precise coordination to be effective. Dr. Sarah Chen's group had discovered methods for detecting alien cloaking technology by observing gravitational lensing effects around their ships. Most significantly, a joint European-American research team had identified a potential vulnerability in alien faster-than-light communication systems. If they could disrupt the quantum entanglement networks that allowed instantaneous communication across galactic distances, they might prevent the aliens from calling for reinforcements. Meanwhile, aboard the Council's observation station, Ambassador Kethvar faced the greatest crisis of his political career. The human resistance had transformed what should have been a routine annexation into a potential disaster for galactic stability. The implications extend far beyond this single system, he explained to the Emergency Council session. If humans can develop gravitational warfare technology in a matter of hours, what prevents other primitive species from achieving similar breakthroughs? Our entire expansion doctrine assumes technological superiority. Delegate Zerion's form pulsed with agitated energy. The humans must have received assistance from another galactic power. No species develops such capabilities independently. Our intelligence networks have detected no evidence of outside intervention, reported the Military Assessment Board. All available data suggests this technology emerged from human theoretical research accelerated by desperate circumstances. The Altarian delegate finally spoke, her voice carrying the weight of vindicated warnings. Council members, we must face the possibility that our assessment methodologies are fundamentally flawed. Perhaps we have been categorizing species based on their current technology rather than their adaptive potential. The suggestion sent ripples of unease through the chamber. The Galactic Council's entire power structure was built on the premise that advanced civilizations could easily dominate primitive ones. If species could rapidly develop countermeasures to superior technology, the balance of galactic power became dangerously unstable. What do you propose? Kethvar asked reluctantly. Immediate ceasefire and genuine diplomatic engagement, Tanari replied. The humans have demonstrated they will not submit to conquest, and they possess the capability to inflict serious damage on any force we send against them. Continued military action risks escalating this situation beyond our ability to control. The debate that followed would be remembered as the moment the Galactic Council's confidence in their own supremacy began to crack. Some members advocated for massive military escalation, arguing that allowing humans to defy council authority would encourage rebellion throughout their territory. Others supported immediate withdrawal and formal diplomatic recognition of human sovereignty. But the decision was ultimately made by events rather than debate. Long-range sensors detected energy signatures from the Sol system that defied classification, suggesting the humans were testing weapons even more exotic than their gravitational torpedoes. Whatever they were building, it represented technology that didn't exist in any council database. Admiral Zextar's final report to the council was brief and devastating. Recommend immediate cessation of hostile actions against human civilization. Their technological development rate exceeds all predictive models. Continued engagement poses unacceptable risks to Council forces and galactic stability. The vote that followed was closer than the original annexation authorization, but the result was clear. For the first time in galactic history, the Council voted to recognize the sovereignty of a species they had intended to conquer. The formal declaration reached Earth just as Dr. Tanaka's team achieved their breakthrough in quantum field manipulation. The weapon they had developed could theoretically disable faster-than-light travel across an entire star system, trapping any invasion fleet in normal space where conventional weapons could be effective. Admiral Chen read the Council's message with satisfaction and no small amount of relief. Humanity had bought themselves a place at the galactic table through strength rather than submission, though she understood this was only the beginning of their challenges. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to the combined command center, "we have successfully defended our world against conquest, but we have also announced our presence to a galaxy full of civilizations that may not appreciate our unconventional approach to diplomacy." President Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "What do you recommend, Admiral?" "We continue innovating, we continue preparing, and we make sure the galaxy understands that Earth is not to be trifled with. Today, we proved that humanity doesn't back down when threatened. Tomorrow, we'll show them what we can accomplish when we're not fighting for our survival." The transformation of human civilization accelerated rather than slowed in the weeks that followed. The unity forged in the face of extinction became the foundation for technological advancement that would reshape not just Earth, but the entire galactic community. And in the pristine halls of the Council Station, Ambassador Kethvar filed his final report on the human situation, concluding with words that would echo through galactic history. Recommendation: never underestimate a species fighting for its survival. The humans have reminded us that intelligence and determination can overcome any technological advantage. The galaxy would indeed remember humanity's savage retaliation, and the stunned silence that followed would give way to a new era where primitive worlds were no longer considered easy targets for conquest. Earth had changed the rules of galactic civilization through sheer audacity and the unbreakable human spirit that refused to yield even to impossible odds.